Before we get stuck into the episode, a little plea from me, if I may. I know that we have some awesome and loyal listeners of the show. I can see it in the stats. So thank you so much for listening to the show. My plea is for you to please hit that subscribe button, to like and rate the show, whichever platform you're on. It would mean so much to me. I know this is something that all podcasters are asking for, but it really does make a difference and it would mean a lot to me. So thank you in advance. On with the show. Hello and welcome to Beyond the Bio. In today's solo episode, I am diving into one of my favourite strategies for working smarter and not harder, which is all about repurposing content. Now, we're all super busy, so why reinvent the wheel? If you've created something amazing once, you should be making sure that it works for you again and again. So by the end of this episode, you're going to know how to save time, extend your reach, and get creative with repurposing your existing content. So let's get stuck in. First of all, what is content repurposing? Well, in very simple terms, it is all about reusing the ideas and content that you've already created, but in different formats or for different platforms. As an example, it might be that you have a podcast and you turn a podcast episode into other bits of content, for example, social media posts or a newsletter segment. It could be that you turn that same content into a blog post or an article. Let me think about some of the advantages of repurposing content. I mean, it should be pretty obvious, right? Save time, who doesn't want that? But actually, there's some wider benefits to repurposing content. So the key one obviously is that you don't have to start from scratch every time. So it does save time. But also, you can use repurposing content to reach a wider audience because different people prefer different formats. We all have different learning styles and different ways that we like to consume content. So whether that be audio, video, or written down. So by chopping up your content in different ways, you're probably going to be able to reach more people. Another advantage of repurposing content is that you increase the content's lifespan because your best work shouldn't fade after one use, right? And you can reuse things again. One way that I like to repurpose content is actually when I'm reflecting on what has worked well on social media. So if I think about LinkedIn or Instagram in particular, it's really easy to look at the analytics behind your posts and be able to order the analytics in a way that shows you which type of content is resonating most with your audience. I sometimes have a look on my dashboard on LinkedIn in that analytics part of the dashboard to see which kinds of posts have done the best, whether that be in impressions or engagements or either or. And I then use that to inspire me to reuse that content either on a different social media platform or to give me ideas to write content in other ways. So perhaps an article for the business magazine that I write for, or even just another spin on it for social media. By doing this, I am saving time. I know that the content is likely to land, and it just extends the life of that content that bit more. So how do we turn this into some kind of process and get practical with it? I've thought about some steps for this repurposing process. The step one is going to be to audit your existing content. I've just given you a great example there of how I do that, but think about content that has performed well across all sorts of different formats. So a popular blog post, a podcast, now this could be as a guest or as a host. Think about social media content, anything that you've got on your website, anything that you've written at all or filmed or put out as recording. So where is all the content? Get creative with different types of content and where your content is at the moment and do an audit of what you've got. Step 2 is to repurpose formats. So we've touched on this slightly. So if we look at blog posts as an example, you could turn a blog post into LinkedIn posts or threads or infographics. With podcast episodes, it might be that you use that content to create audiograms or blog summaries or carousel posts. If you've written a book or you've created some other type of written content, it might be that you turn that into keynote slides or short form videos. I've used my most recent book, From Unknown to Unforgettable, in so many different ways. So from that content, I've created courses, I've created workshops, I've created a couple of keynote talks, I've definitely created social media posts, I've written some articles for Elite Business that are based on that content, and I've come up with podcast episode plans for this very show. If you listen to this show a lot, you know that I really rate books, and I think that is the ultimate piece of content because you can chop that in so many ways. But for now, if you haven't written a book, get creative around what you have written and think about how you can chop that up into different types of content yourself. Step 3, for this step, you need to think about tailoring it for the platform. So if you are putting something out on social media, you need to adjust the tone and length based on where you're sharing. For example, if you are turning your content into an Instagram reel, it's going to be a much sharper, shorter, to the point piece of content versus if you're writing a LinkedIn article, and you're going to have different graphics for that, because obviously if you're doing an Instagram reel and it's you talking straight to camera potentially, that's going to be very different from doing a LinkedIn article where you perhaps might just need to find a relevant photo that fits. Step 4 is all about creating a repurposing routine. So think about what tools or workflows you use that are going to make repurposing easier. For example, there are all sorts of content mapping tools out there that will be able to help you with this goal. Another thing might be that you look at scheduling tools, so things like Buffer or Hootsuite or whatever you use to schedule, if you schedule your social media content, or even just having it all in one place to make it easy that if you are preparing social media posts in advance, for example, that you're able to copy and paste it in a very easy and slick way. So it's making sure that you've got everything in the place it needs to be, whether you just create a folder on your desktop and have everything stored in the same place so that you're not flapping about when it comes to sharing this content. If you follow that step-by-step guide, it's going to help you to get your content into some kind of order. Think creatively about how it is going to be repurposed and come up with some sort of plan or schedule to actually make it happen. But what common mistakes should you be avoiding while you are taking on this strategy? I think there's a couple of things that I see often. So let's start off with reposting content on socials, but without tailoring it. And this isn't necessarily just on social media, actually. It could be a blog post that you've turned into something else, or an article or whatever. And the key thing with this, when you're not tailoring it, is that audiences can tell when it's a bit lazy. They can tell if you're just literally copying and pasting the same stuff across different platforms. So you do need to tailor it to the specific platform. If we think about a blog post or an article as a decent piece of longer form content, if you're then chopping that up for social media, for example, if you're doing an Instagram reel, it's going to be, 90 seconds long? It has to be straight to the point. And when I had Jo Hutton on the show talking about Instagram reels earlier in the year, she was very clear on how you have to get to the point and cut through the fluff. So that is going to be very different compared to how the article is probably written in the first place, where it might have an introduction and a conclusion. You've got to cut straight through to the meaty stuff, otherwise people aren't going to watch it. The other thing would be around platforms where there is a character limit as to what you can say. So a piece of long form content or an article that's on LinkedIn is not going to cut it on the likes of X, or Twitter as we still call it. So things like that need to be considered. Another mistake to avoid is overloading one platform. So spread your content out strategically. I see sometimes people get really excited about a particular platform and almost go from 0 to 100 and posting stuff constantly. So LinkedIn is a great example. I'm not a fan of posting on LinkedIn all the time. I think you can get away with posting less frequently on LinkedIn and still have lots of engagement. But sometimes you see people that think, right, I've got all this content, I'm just going to put it out there, and you might see them post 3 or 4 times in a day on LinkedIn. I would say that's definitely overloading on LinkedIn in particular. So think about how you spread it out strategically. If you're using that same piece of content across various different platforms, it's spacing it out so you haven't got the same thing over all of the platforms at once. Another common mistake is not tracking what works. I talk a lot on this show about taking action, but if you don't track what works, is there much point in taking action? Like, how do you know if it's been successful or if it works? By tracking what works, especially on something like repurposing content, you're going to be able to keep an eye on the metrics, see what's working, and tweak your approach. And as always, this is going to be time, potentially a cost involved as well. So you want to make sure that you're getting that return on investment. So make sure you track it. And the other thing with tracking is if you are repurposing content and you're thinking that whatever you've got isn't time sensitive, it might be that you come back and use that piece of content again in a year's time. So again, that's worth tracking to see when you last posted on that particular topic, or even that same piece of content and you use it again. So there we have it. Repurposing content isn't just about working less, it's about working smarter to amplify your impact. Now it's your turn. What one piece of content have you created recently that you could repurpose? I'd love to know what you come up with. So let me know, maybe tag me in any repurposed posts and let me have a look, or send it to me. I would love to see what you've come up with. As always, thank you for joining me on this episode of Beyond the Bio. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and rate on your favourite platform, and I will see you on the show next time. As we head into 2025, I'm already planning the topics and guests to bring to Beyond the Bio. If you have any guest suggestions or topics, perhaps it's you or someone incredible that you know and or admire, please hit me up with your suggestions. I'm all ears. We will pop a link to the podcast guest form in the show notes.